We all know that feeling, right? You want to dive deep into a topic, really get the full picture, but the thought of sorting through tons of information, it can feel pretty overwhelming.
It can be daunting for sure.
But that's why we're here, right? To do that deep dive for you, to pull out the key insights, the surprising bits that make it all come together.
Exactly.
And today we're tackling something that I think a lot of us are curious about: how to unleash our creative potential.
And luckily for us, we've got a fantastic guide for this exploration, Creative Confidence by Tom and David Kelley. They dive deep into this very concept, creative confidence, and offer some really practical advice on how to cultivate it.
I'm so glad we're talking about this book.
Yeah.
I have to admit, when I first heard the title Creative Confidence, I thought, well, isn't that just for artists and designers? But as I started digging in, I realized it's so much broader than that.
Oh, absolutely. It really challenges the notion that creativity is this exclusive thing,
Yeah.
a gift reserved for a select few.
Right. And I think most of us have probably felt that at some point. That I'm just not creative kind of feeling. Like it's a fixed trait, something you either have or you don't.
Like it's predetermined, yeah.
But one of the most powerful ideas this book puts forward is that this feeling, this I'm not creative thing, is actually a much bigger obstacle than any actual lack of ability.
It's like a self-imposed limitation.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to explore in this deep dive, the idea that we all have these creative capabilities within us. We're going to look at why those abilities sometimes feel blocked.
Right.
And even more importantly, how to break through those blocks and start using that inherent creativity, not just in our work, but in every aspect of our lives.
It really is a mindset shift, isn't it? This idea that creativity isn't some rare gift, but it's actually a fundamental part of being human.
It is. And one of the things I found so inspiring about the Kelley brothers, the authors, is their own diverse backgrounds. David's journey was much more through the arts, unconventional spaces, while Tom initially navigated the more traditional business world.
Their stories really demonstrate that creativity isn't confined to one specific domain.
Exactly. And it's not just their own experiences that back this up. The book's been praised by innovators across all sorts of fields. John Maeda, Guy Kawasaki, you've got Mark Hoplamazian, Seth Godin. They all point to its practical, down-to-earth approach to innovation.
The book really resonates with a wide range of people.
So our mission in this deep dive is to equip you with some tangible takeaways. We want you to finish this conversation feeling empowered to cultivate your own creative confidence and to start seeing those everyday challenges, the ones at work, the ones in your personal life, as opportunities for creative problem solving, not as roadblocks, but as springboards.
Sounds great. Let's get to it. So let's unpack this core idea, the idea that everybody's the creative type. The book dives into this right from the start, pointing out how often we hear that phrase, "I'm just not creative." And it suggests that this phrase often acts as a kind of shield.
A defense mechanism.
Yeah, a way to protect ourselves from the vulnerability that comes with putting our creative ideas out there.
It's like this story we've internalized, almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. But here's the interesting thing. What I find so encouraging is that the book highlights that when people are actually given a structured approach, when they're given the tools and the process to engage with their creative side,
They surprise themselves.
they totally do. They come up with these really original ideas. They collaborate in ways they didn't think they could. And they have this, wait a minute, I am being creative moment.
It's a really transformative experience.
Totally. It changes how they see themselves. And all of a sudden, this whole world of possibilities opens up. And one of the points the book makes, which I thought was really insightful, is that this creative energy isn't just for artistic pursuits. It's actually a vital resource for tackling those really tough problems, the ones that feel almost impossible to solve.
Like that creative energy is a key to innovation.
Yeah. That's it. The book frames creative confidence not just as a skill set, but as a fundamental way of interacting with the world around us. It's about approaching things with this mindset that's constantly seeking new solutions. And what's so important here is that this isn't some exclusive club, where you need a special invitation to join. It's something that's in every single one of us, regardless of our background, regardless of our profession.
It's a human ability.
Yes. And to really bring this to life, to show how powerful this human-centered approach can be, the book tells the story of Doug Deitz, a designer at GE Healthcare. And initially, he felt so proud, so accomplished, designing MRI machines. I mean, these were cutting-edge pieces of technology.
Huge feats of engineering.
Absolutely. But then he had this really profound experience. He saw a young child, a little girl, approaching his MRI machine, and she was terrified.
Oh, I remember that part.
You could see the fear in her eyes.
Mm.
And he overheard her parents trying to comfort her. And it hit him, this machine that he saw as this pinnacle of technological design.
It was actually a source of terror.
Exactly. It was a big, scary machine through the eyes of this child. And that moment, that realization, it sparked this huge personal crisis for him. All that pride he felt was replaced by this feeling of failure, like he wasn't truly serving the people he was trying to help.
So he could have easily just shrugged it off, said, well, that's just how kids are.
But he didn't.
No, he took it to heart.
He did. He wanted to find a way to make things better. And as luck would have it, his boss recommended an executive education program at Stanford's D School. Dett was looking for a new methodology, a different lens to view this problem of how to make MRIs less scary for kids.
He's looking for a new way to think about it.
Yeah. And that's where he discovered human-centered design. The focus shifted away from just the technical capabilities, the speed, the image quality, and towards deeply understanding the experience, the emotional state of these young patients.
Putting himself in their shoes.
Yes. And he really immersed himself in their world. He tried to understand what they were going through, what their fears were. And this empathetic approach, it led to this incredible reimagining of the entire MRI experience. He didn't just change the machine itself, he transformed the whole environment around it.
It was like a total makeover.
It was. He turned the MRI suite into a pirate adventure complete with decorations, a story that really captured the children's imagination.
So instead of this cold, clinical experience,
It became this fun adventure, and the results were amazing. The need for sedation in pediatric patients dropped dramatically. Patient satisfaction scores shot up by 90%. But what really stands out, what the book highlights, is that for Doug, the most meaningful outcome wasn't those statistics. It was a simple question from a little girl after her scan in the pirate ship. She asked, "Mommy, can we come back tomorrow?"
oh, that's fantastic.
I know. That question, it captured the profound impact of his human-centered design. It showed that he truly succeeded in transforming a frightening experience into something positive.
It's such a powerful example of how prioritizing the human element, understanding the emotional experience, can lead to these truly groundbreaking innovations.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And this brings us to the concept of design thinking, which the book explains as the core methodology used by IDEO and the D School to foster creativity and innovation. And it boils down to finding that sweet spot where something is not only technologically feasible and economically viable, but also genuinely desirable to the people who will use it.
Finding that perfect intersection.
Exactly. And design thinking, as the book outlines it, typically involves 4 interconnected phases: inspiration, synthesis, ideation and experimentation, and then implementation. And what's crucial here, and what ties directly back to what we were just talking about, is that empathy is the primary driver for that initial inspiration phase.
Empathy is the spark.
It is. It's about truly understanding the needs, the desires, the underlying motivations of real people. It's about going beyond surface-level assumptions and really connecting with their experiences. And in terms of how this links to creative confidence, that initial spark of inspiration fueled by empathy, it provides you with the raw material for seeing new possibilities.
It gives you that starting point.
Yeah. And the book delves into various methods for cultivating that empathy. Things like observing people in their natural contexts, conducting interviews with what they call extreme users, those who might have unique perspectives because they use a product or service in an unconventional way. They even talk about drawing inspiration from how other industries have tackled similar challenges.
It's about broadening your perspective.
Absolutely. And IDEO themselves, they've used some really interesting techniques to develop that deeper level of empathy. The book shares examples like team members washing clothes by hand in someone's sink to understand their process, staying in housing projects to really experience the living conditions, observing surgeons in the operating room to get a feel for their workflow, even trying to calm down frustrated passengers in airport security lines.
So they're not just reading reports, they're getting out there, getting their hands dirty.
Exactly. And it's through these direct, firsthand experiences that they've uncovered some really surprising insights, those unmet needs that lead to genuinely innovative solutions. The book gives examples like easy-to-use heart defibrillators, designed with an understanding of the panic someone might feel in an emergency situation, and even debit cards, specifically designed to encourage retirement savings by making financial information clearer and more accessible.
They're really thinking outside the box, finding creative solutions to problems that maybe we didn't even realize were problems.
Totally. Now, moving on a bit. The book then dives into the importance of mindset. Specifically, it introduces Carol Dweck's research on the growth mindset and the fixed mindset.
This is fascinating stuff.
It really is. So, a growth mindset at its core is the belief that your abilities and intelligence aren't fixed. They're not set in stone.
They're malleable.
Exactly. It's the belief that you can develop and improve through effort, through learning from your experiences, through embracing challenges. It's that conviction that your potential isn't predetermined.
So it's like saying, I may not be great at this yet, but I can get better with practice.
Yes. And on the flip side, you have the fixed mindset, which is the belief that your intelligence and your talents are largely innate, like you're born with a certain amount of ability and that's it. People with a fixed mindset, they tend to think you either have it or you don't.
And there's not much you can do to change that.
Right. And the book explains how this fixed mindset can really hold you back. It can lead people to shy away from challenges, to stick to what they know, because deep down, there's this fear that if they try something new and fail,
It'll expose their limitations.
exactly, like it confirms their belief that they just don't have the innate ability. And the book shares this really interesting study that Dweck conducted with freshman students at the University of Hong Kong. Because English is the language of instruction, students with weaker English skills, they face this big academic hurdle.
So this was a real challenge for them.
It was, and Dweck surveyed these students, those with both growth and fixed mindsets. She asked them if they'd be interested in taking an optional English improvement course.
So a chance to get better.
Exactly. And the results were so telling. The students who had a growth mindset, they were generally open to it. They were excited about the opportunity to improve. But those with a fixed mindset, they were much less likely to want to take the course.
Almost like admitting they needed help was too threatening.
Yes. It's like acknowledging that they needed help would somehow confirm their belief that they weren't good enough. And this really highlights how a fixed mindset can actually prevent people from achieving their full potential.
It becomes a self-sabotaging belief.
It does. And in contrast to this, the book presents the growth mindset as this passport to new adventures. It's an invitation to explore, to develop, to embrace that unlimited potential that lies within. It's the fundamental belief that you're not stuck, you can always grow and learn.
It's a much more empowering way to look at things.
Absolutely. And the authors make this really important point that we all have elements of both mindsets within us. We all have that voice of the fixed mindset that whispers doubts and anxieties.
That inner critic.
Yeah, that inner critic. But we also have the voice of the growth mindset, encouraging us to step outside our comfort zone, to embrace the learning process. And the key is becoming aware of these voices, listening to them, and consciously choosing which one to feed, which one to give more weight to.
It's about being in control of your own mindset.
Exactly. Now, even if you start to shift towards a more growth-oriented mindset, there's still this big hurdle that a lot of us face, the fear of failure. And the book tackles this head-on. They use this really compelling analogy of overcoming snake phobias through gradual exposure, a technique called guided mastery developed by Albert Bandura.
I remember that example. It was so vivid.
It was. So Bandura's approach involved this carefully planned series of challenges, starting with something small, something that wouldn't trigger too much anxiety for someone with a severe snake phobia, like maybe just acknowledging that there's a snake in a different room.
So baby steps.
Exactly. And then, gradually, step by step, he'd guide them through more challenging interactions. Maybe looking at a picture of a snake, then observing someone else holding a snake through a window, and eventually getting closer and closer until they could be in the same room as the snake and even touch it.
It's like desensitizing them to their fear.
It is. And the amazing thing is, as the book describes, through these small, manageable steps, that intense phobia would often completely disappear. They even tell the story of this woman whose dream about snakes completely transformed. It went from being terrifying to actually positive, where a boa constrictor was helping her with chores around the house.
Wow, that's incredible.
I know. And the book draws this really insightful parallel between touching the snake in that therapeutic context and confronting our own fear of failure in our creative endeavors. It's that fear of being judged, the anxiety about even starting a project, the worry about what the outcome might be.
Those fears can be so paralyzing.
They can, and they really debunk this myth that creative geniuses somehow operate in this realm where failure doesn't exist. They point to research by Professor Dean Keith Simonton, which actually suggests the opposite, that highly creative individuals tend to experience more failures simply because they experiment more, they take more risks, they generate a larger volume of ideas. So those higher failure rates, when combined with quick iteration and learning, they're not a sign of incompetence. They're actually a hallmark of ambitious exploration. It's not about avoiding failure, it's about learning from it.
It's about the quality of the failures, not the quantity.
Exactly. It's that surprising, compelling mathematics of innovation, as the book puts it. To achieve more significant successes, you have to be willing to embrace more failures. It's part of the process. And they give historical examples like Thomas Edison and all his attempts to perfect the light bulb.
Or the Wright brothers and all their failed glider flights before they finally achieved liftoff at Kitty Hawk.
Exactly. And even in more recent times, they talk about the development of the Steelcase Note Chair, this really innovative classroom seating solution, which involved over 200 prototypes. It wasn't a straight line to the final design. It was this constant back and forth of trying things out, seeing what worked, learning from what didn't.
So failure is just part of the journey.
It is. And the book emphasizes that experienced innovators, they don't shy away from their failures. In fact, they often share their war stories because they see them as valuable learning experiences. And they connect Bandura's concept of guided mastery to the iterative nature of design thinking. They're saying that by breaking down those big, scary challenges into smaller, more manageable experiments, we can gradually overcome our fear of failure. We can build confidence through a series of small wins.
It's about taking those baby steps and celebrating those little victories along the way.
Exactly. Now, even if you start to get a handle on that fear of failure, there's still the challenge of actually taking action. And this is where the book introduces Jane McGonigal's concept of urgent optimism, which she borrows from the world of gaming.
Urgent optimism. I love that phrase.
It's great, isn't it? So she describes it as this powerful combination of a desire to act immediately to address a challenge and a genuine belief that you have a good chance of succeeding. And it's this mindset that you see a lot in video games, where players are constantly encountering obstacles, but they're motivated to keep trying because they believe they can overcome them.
Like they're on a quest.
Exactly. And it's that same persistence and gradual skill development that we see in kids learning to ride a bike or mastering a new level in a video game. It's that willingness to keep going even when things get tough. And the book argues that cultivating this urgent optimism, maybe even drawing inspiration from how engaging games can be, can really shift your mindset towards greater creative confidence.
It's about tapping into that sense of possibility.
Yes. But even after you've started to build some creative confidence, the book emphasizes that it's important to keep challenging yourself, to keep stretching those creative muscles. They use the analogy of physical fitness. You need to exercise regularly to stay strong.
So it's like a creative workout.
Exactly. And this ties in with Diego Rodriguez's idea of informed intuition. He says that through consistent practice and what he calls mileage, the number of projects you've worked on, the experiences you've accumulated, you develop a deeper understanding. It allows you to make more insightful leaps. You start to trust your gut more.
It's like you're building up this creative knowledge base.
You are. The more you create, the more you learn, the more confident you become in your ability to assess new ideas, to navigate those uncertain situations. And another important point the book makes is about the importance of permission to fail.
This is huge.
It is. They argue that in environments where mistakes are seen as opportunities for learning rather than reasons for punishment, people are much more likely to take creative risks. They're more likely to try something new, to think outside the box.
It creates a sense of safety.
It does. And they contrast this with what they call constructive failure, which is how failure is often viewed in places like Silicon Valley. It's this idea that failure isn't the end, it's an opportunity to extract valuable lessons.
So you fail fast and learn from it.
Exactly. And the book gives some really interesting examples of this openness to failure. They mention Bessemer Venture Partners, this incredibly successful venture capital firm, which actually has an anti-portfolio on their website.
An anti-portfolio.
I know, it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but it's basically a list of companies they chose not to invest in that went on to become huge successes. It's their way of acknowledging their mistakes and learning from them.
That's so refreshing.
It is. And author Tina Seelig, she actually has her students create a failure resume. They highlight their biggest setbacks and what they learned from those experiences. It's a way to encourage people to own their mistakes, not try to hide them.
To see them as part of the learning process.
Absolutely. And the book also touches on how our childhood experiences can shape our creative confidence later in life. They share this really poignant anecdote about growing up in an environment where tinkering and experimenting were encouraged. Like, even something like taking apart a perfectly good bike and repainting it just for the fun of it.
Sounds like my childhood.
Right. And they contrast this with the idea of a creativity scar, this moment where someone's creative expression was met with harsh judgment or criticism, leading them to believe they weren't creative.
Which can be so damaging.
It can. And to help people overcome this fear of expressing themselves creatively, especially visually, they discuss Dan Rome's approach to visual communication. He breaks down drawing into 5 basic shapes and some fundamental principles, showing that you don't need to be an artist to communicate effectively through sketches.
So he makes it accessible.
Exactly. And ultimately, what the book emphasizes is that by developing a can-do mindset, that proactive approach, and combining it with the structure of a design thinking methodology, you give yourself more options. You create more pathways for action. You overcome those hesitations and fears. They share this quote from Georgi Conrad: "Courage is only the accumulation of small steps. It's about starting small, building momentum, and expanding your comfort zone bit by bit."
It's a journey, not a destination.
I like that. Now, we've talked about the internal barriers, those fears and mindsets that hold us back. Let's look at how to cultivate that do-something attitude, that proactive spirit that's crucial for turning those creative sparks into actual results. The book talks about embracing constraints, and they use a really powerful story to illustrate this: the Embrace Infant Warmer. It's a prime example of how tackling a seemingly impossible challenge can actually lead to more innovative solutions than addressing a simpler problem.
This is the story about the low-cost incubator, right?
It is. So the team behind the Embrace Infant Warmer, they didn't just set out to create a cheaper version of a standard incubator. They really took the time to understand the specific needs and limitations of mothers and newborns in rural India, where access to electricity and hospitals was often a major problem.
So they were designing for a very specific context.
They were. And their final design, this portable, sleeping bag-like device with a self-regulating paraffin-based heating pouch, it was a direct response to those constraints. But a key part of their process was going to those villages in India to test their prototypes with the people who would actually be using them.
They went straight to the source.
They did. And that's where they got a crucial piece of feedback. They discovered that some mothers were hesitant to heat the warmer to the exact temperature recommended because they believed that Western medicine was too strong for babies.
Oh, wow. A cultural difference.
Exactly. And a lot of engineers, they might have dismissed that as a misunderstanding, but the Embrace team, they took it seriously. They redesigned their temperature indicator. Instead of a precise numerical reading, they used a simple OK symbol. It removed that potential for misinterpretation.
They adapted their design based on user feedback.
They did. And the impact of the Embrace Warmer has been huge. They've helped thousands of babies, expanded to multiple countries, even partnered with GE Healthcare. It's a testament to the idea that innovation can come from anywhere, fueled by curiosity, optimism, that do-something attitude.
And those constraints, they actually forced them to be more creative.
They did. The book also highlights the importance of generating lots of ideas. They quote Linus Pauling, who said, "If you want a good idea, start with a lot of ideas." And they talk about how at IDEO, they encourage a constant flow of conversations about new technologies, cultural trends, unconventional ideas. It's all about priming that creative pump.
Keeping those creative juices flowing.
Exactly. They even mention the community chalkboard they have in their office restrooms.
In the restrooms.
I know, it sounds strange, but it's their way of gathering spontaneous input. It's a reminder that inspiration can strike anywhere.
You never know where that next great idea will come from.
You don't. Now, going back to empathy, the book emphasizes that it's not just about feeling sorry for someone. It's about truly trying to see the world through their eyes. It's about doing design research, immersing yourself in their world, observing, having those in-depth conversations.
It's about understanding their lived experience.
It is. And they give a great example with PNC Bank. Through extensive interviews, they realized that the Gen Y demographic, they had these specific financial needs and challenges. So they developed new tools and services to help them manage their money better, even though it meant potentially losing revenue from overdraft fees. Their focus was on building those long-term relationships based on empathy.
They put the customer first.
They did. And there's this great anecdote about someone noticing that mismatched sneakers were a fashion trend in Tokyo, and that sparked the idea for the Little Mismatched sock brand. It's a reminder to stay open, to be curious, to look for those unexpected opportunities.
It's about seeing the world with fresh eyes.
Exactly. And the book also cautions against holding on to outdated knowledge. They share Tom's experience of revisiting Singapore after many years and being amazed by how much it had changed. It highlights the need to stay current, to challenge our assumptions.
To keep learning.
Yes. And they talk about Amanda, who shifted her approach in the emergency room from a purely medical mindset to a more anthropological one.
Like becoming a detective.
Right. Instead of just focusing on physical symptoms, she started trying to understand her patients' beliefs, their motivations, like in her interaction with the energy healer.
So she was looking beyond the surface.
She was. And they highlight Colita Stafford's unique interview techniques. Like asking someone to convince a friend to read a specific book, it's a way to get beyond those surface level answers.
So uncover those deeper motivations.
Yes. And they stress that effective empathy in interviews, it's not just about asking people what they want. It's often about reframing the question to uncover their underlying needs.
Because sometimes people don't even know what they want.
Exactly. They give an example of shifting the question from, how can we make this surgical tool lighter, to how might we make this tool more comfortable to use for long periods? It opens up a whole new range of possibilities.
That's a subtle but powerful shift.
It is. And they offer some strategies for reframing questions, like stepping back from those obvious solutions and trying to see the problem from different perspectives. Now, the book also shares the experience of Ankit and Akshay in the Launchpad course at the D School, where they had to start a real company in a very short amount of time.
That sounds intense.
It was. And their success with their Pulse News app, it really came down to rapid prototyping and constantly getting feedback from potential users. They were testing their ideas in a local cafe, getting real-time input.
So they were learning by doing.
They were. And this really embodies that do something mindset the book champions. Minimize the planning, maximize the action, get those early customer interactions, build those quick prototypes.
Don't get bogged down in the details.
Ooh.
Just start creating.
Exactly. And they tell the story of John Keefe, who built a working prototype for a bus arrival information service in just 24 hours. And Tom Kelley's own story about seeing a misplaced bus shelter and immediately wanting to do something about it. It's that bias towards action.
Not just thinking about it, but actually doing something.
Yes. And the book encourages us to take those wouldn't it be great if thoughts and turn them into action. They even recommend keeping a bug list of those daily frustrations, those little things that bug you.
Turning those annoyances into opportunities.
Precisely. And they talk about the knowing-doing gap, using the example of Kodak, which knew about digital photography early on but failed to act on it. And they used Bernie Roth's water bottle exercise, which shows the difference between trying and actually doing.
It's about committing to action.
Yes. And they emphasize committing to that process of constant improvement, that bird-by-bird approach. Don't get hung up on perfection, just start creating. And they even address procrastination, referencing Stephen Pressfield's concept of resistance, that internal force that holds us back.
We all know that feeling.
We do. Now, going back to constraints, they show how limitations can actually boost creativity. They mention Francis Ford Coppola's low-budget filmmaking techniques, where those limitations actually forced him to come up with ingenious solutions. They talk about rapid prototyping, like using a video to test the user experience of a car feature instead of building the whole system.
So finding those creative workarounds.
Exactly. And they even introduce Boyle's Law. Never go to a meeting without a prototype.
I love that.
They also recommend storyboarding as a quick way to prototype experiences. And they stress the importance of delaying judgment during brainstorming, allowing for those wild ideas to emerge.
Don't shut anything down too early.
Exactly. And they use the example of Air New Zealand's unconventional seating ideas like bunk beds and the sky couch. They also define launch to learn, highlighting the value of small experiments, like those West Point students who created a petition for a pedestrian bridge just to see what would happen. And their experiment, it actually had a real impact. So the point is, embrace experimentation. Even if you fail, you learn something.
Failure's data.
It is. They also discuss Jim Hackett's experiment at Steelcase with the open-air leadership community. Now, shifting gears a bit, the book dives into this really important idea of optimizing for meaning. It contrasts those decisions based purely on money with those driven by purpose and fulfillment.
It's about finding that deeper sense of satisfaction.
It is. And they give examples of people who chased financial success but ended up miserable, like the investment banker who developed health problems from stress, or the MBA graduate who felt empty despite their achievements. And they contrast these with David Kelley's own career choices, which were guided by passion and impact, not just money.
So finding work that aligns with your values.
Exactly. They also share Jeremy Utley's experience at the D School, which led him to leave a high-paying but unfulfilling job to pursue something more meaningful. And David's own experience at Boeing, where he felt trapped in a looks good, feels bad situation, compared to the passion he feels for his work at IDU.
It's about finding work that energizes you, not drains you.
Absolutely. And this leads into Amy Wisniewski's research on how people view their work. She talks about jobs, careers, and callings. And the book highlights that those who see their work as a calling, they experience more intrinsic reward. They feel connected to a larger purpose.
They're not just clocking in and out.
No, they're doing something they believe in. But they also make the point that even passions require hard work. They share the story of Yo-Yo Ma, this incredibly talented cellist who still practices diligently. And they talk about Scott Dorley's creative gym class, which encourages experimentation and helps people overcome their fear of trying new things. It relates to his later willingness to cold call potential investors for his startup.
So even when you're passionate, you still need to put in the effort.
You do. And they introduce Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's concept of flow, that state of deep immersion and enjoyment you can experience in certain activities. And they talk about Jim Collins's early practice of self-reflection, where he kept a notebook to identify his passions. David even shares his Rate My Day exercise, a way to reflect on your activities and make more conscious choices.
So being more mindful of how you spend your time.
Yes. And the book encourages trying new things, experimenting with different roles and activities, treating them like prototypes. They give examples of people finding passion in unexpected places, like a hospitality manager, a tax accountant, a former options trader who became a teacher. And they recommend pursuing passion projects outside of work, like Tom Kelley writing The Art of Innovation in his spare time. And they share Lauren's experience at the D School, where she shifted from memorizing legal cases to creative problem solving, and how that newfound confidence helped her in a mock trial.
So finding those outlets for your creativity.
Exactly. Finally, the book focuses on how to cultivate creative confidence within teams and organizations. They argue that big, impactful innovations often require collaboration and a supportive culture.
It's about creating an environment where creativity can thrive.
It is. They share Karen Hansen's work at Intuit, where she implemented design thinking across the company. And they introduce Mauro Porcini's 5 phases of creative confidence for companies, ranging from denial to full integration. And they emphasize the importance of experiencing the methodology firsthand. It's show, don't tell, and the role of internal coaches in guiding others.
So leading by example.
Exactly. They also discuss team.